You're sitting in an emergency room. Your arm is throbbing. The bone snapped an hour ago, and since then, everything has moved fast. They took an x-ray that showed the break in crisp detail on a screen. A doctor looked at it for about 10 seconds and said, "Clean fracture. We'll set it and cast it." Someone gave you painkillers. Someone else wrapped your arm in a hard shell that would hold the bone perfectly in place for the next 6 weeks. You walked out the same day. Annoyed, sure. In a bit of pain, definitely. But alive. Completely fine. Barely even a story worth telling. Now rewind 50,000 years. Same bone, same snap, same white-hot pain that shoots up your arm and makes your vision blur. Except there's no emergency room. No x-ray, no painkillers, no cast, no doctor. There's you, a broken bone, and the African savanna stretching out in every direction, full of predators that can smell blood from a mile away. A broken bone in the modern world is an inconvenience. A broken bone in the ancient world was a death sentence, except it wasn't. And the reason it wasn't is one of the most important stories about what it means to be human. Let's go. First, let's talk about what a broken bone actually does to you when you can't treat it. A fractured arm means you can't grip, can't carry, can't climb, can't swing a tool, can't defend yourself. A fractured leg is worse. A broken femur, the largest bone in your body, requires a minimum of 6 weeks to heal. 6 weeks. During that time, you cannot walk, you cannot run, you cannot hunt, gather food, collect water, or escape from anything. In a world where every calorie matters, where your group is constantly moving to follow game and find water, where predators are actively hunting at night, being unable to move for 6 weeks should mean death. You are a liability. You consume food and water without contributing any. You slow the group down. You attract predators. The cold mathematical logic of survival says you should be left behind. And yet, archaeologists keep finding healed bones. Not just occasionally, constantly, across every continent, every time period, every species of human. Bones that were clearly shattered, clearly devastating, clearly should have killed the person. And they healed. The fracture lines fused. New bone grew over the break. The person lived for months, years, sometimes decades after the injury. Every single one of those healed bones is proof that someone else kept that person alive. The oldest evidence of this comes from a place most people have never heard of, Dmanisi, a small town in the Republic of Georgia. In 2002, a team of paleoanthropologists excavating the site found a skull that changed how we think about compassion. It was 1.77 million years old. It belonged to a Homo erectus, one of our earliest direct ancestors. And this individual had no teeth. Nearly every tooth had fallen out long before death, and the empty sockets had completely reabsorbed into the jawbone, a process that takes years. This person had lived for years without teeth, in a world with no blenders, no cooked grains, no soft food of any kind. Someone was processing food for them, chewing it, mashing it, somehow making it soft enough for a toothless individual to swallow. For years, 1.77 million years ago, before language as we know it, before art, before fire was consistently controlled, and already someone was keeping a helpless member of their group alive. That's not a million-year-old skeleton, that's a million-year-old act of kindness. But the clearest evidence of ancient humans caring for broken and battered bodies comes from a cave in northern Iraq. Shanidar Cave, first excavated by Ralph Selecki in the 1950s, produced some of the most famous Neanderthal remains ever found. One skeleton in particular, known as Shanidar 1, tells a story that's hard to hear without feeling something. Shanidar 1 was a Neanderthal male who lived roughly 45 to 70,000 years ago. By the time he died, somewhere between 35 and 50 years old, his body was a catalog of injuries. He had suffered a crushing blow to the left side of his face that likely left him blind or partially blind in one eye. His right arm had been fractured and healed badly, eventually withering to the point where his lower arm and hand were gone entirely. His right leg and foot were deformed, giving him a painful, permanent limp. Analysis of his ear bones suggests he was partially deaf. Blind in one eye, one arm, limping, partially deaf. In a world where survival depended on hunting, climbing, fighting, and running, and he lived for years with these injuries, possibly decades. He could not have survived alone. Paleoanthropologist Eric Trinkhaus concluded that Shanidar I must have been aided by others in his group. He couldn't hunt, he probably couldn't gather effectively. Every day of his continued existence was a choice his group made. They fed him, they protected him, they moved at his pace or carried him. For years. And Shanidar I wasn't unique. All 4 of the older males found at Shanidar Cave showed healed traumatic injuries. This wasn't a single act of mercy. It was a pattern. So what did they actually do when someone broke a bone? The oldest surviving splints come from ancient Egypt, around 2750 BCE. Archaeologists found fractured limbs wrapped in wooden boards, padded with linen bandages. But the practice is far older. Neolithic remains from across Europe show fractures that were immobilized with bark, sticks, and plant fiber bindings. The technique is crude by modern standards, but effective. Stabilize the bone. Stop it from moving. Let the body do the rest. For pain, they had willow bark. Willow bark contains salicin, which your body converts into the same active compound found in aspirin. Archaeological evidence suggests willow bark is the oldest continuously used medicine in human history. Ancient peoples across every continent, from the Iroquois in North America to healers in ancient China and Greece, independently discovered that chewing willow bark reduced pain and fever. Hippocrates prescribed it to women during childbirth. It works. It has always worked. Your ancestors were taking aspirin 10,000 years before Bayer put it in a bottle. But they didn't stop at splints and painkillers. Some of what ancient humans did to broken and damaged bodies borders on the unbelievable. Trepanation, drilling a hole in a living person's skull. And it wasn't rare. Archaeologists have found evidence of trepanation in 5 to 10% of all Neolithic skulls across Europe. That's not a few desperate attempts. That's a widespread, practiced surgical procedure. The tools were flint scrapers and obsidian blades. The anesthesia was probably some combination of alcohol and herbs. In other words, get them drunk and hope for the best. And the survival rate was extraordinary. In some French archaeological sites, over 70% of trepanned skulls show advanced bone healing around the hole, meaning the patient lived for months or years afterward. Some skulls show multiple trepanation sites. The same person survived the procedure more than once. And then there's the discovery that rewrites everything we thought we knew about Stone Age medicine. In 2022, researchers published a paper in Nature describing a skeleton found in Liang Tebo Cave in Borneo. It was roughly 31,000 years old, a young Homo sapiens, about 19 or 20 at time of death. The lower third of their left leg was missing, not broken off, not lost to decay, surgically amputated. The bone showed clean, deliberate cut marks consistent with a planned surgery, not a violent injury. The remaining bone had healed completely, with none of the infection markers you'd expect from a traumatic accident. Skeletal analysis showed the individual survived the amputation and lived for another 6 to 9 years. They were then intentionally buried in the cave. 31,000 years ago. Before agriculture, before pottery, before metal. Someone in a rainforest cave in Borneo performed a surgical amputation using stone tools, kept the wound from becoming infected, and the patient walked or managed to move for almost a decade afterward. The previous oldest known amputation was 7,000 years old. This discovery pushed that record back by 24,000 years. There's a quote widely attributed to the anthropologist Margaret Mead, though no one has actually confirmed she said it. A student supposedly asked her what she considered the first sign of civilization. They expected her to say a clay pot, a tool, a religious artifact. Instead, she said a healed femur, because in the animal kingdom, a broken femur means death. You can't run. You can't feed yourself. You're taken by predators. A healed femur means somebody stayed. Somebody brought food and water. Somebody protected a helpless person at their own expense for weeks, gaining nothing in return. Whether Mead actually said it doesn't matter. The archaeology says it for her. Go to any natural history museum in the world. Look at the bones. Not the skulls or the tools, the bones. The femurs with thick ridges of healed calcium where a fracture fused back together. The spines bent with arthritis that should have immobilized someone decades earlier. The jawbones with every tooth gone and the sockets sealed over with years of new growth. Every single one of those bones is the same sentence, repeated across continents and millennia and species. Someone stayed. For 99% of human history, a broken bone meant you couldn't move, couldn't eat, couldn't protect yourself. And somebody decided that didn't matter. They brought you food, they kept the fire going. They watched for predators while you slept. They did this for weeks. Sometimes months, sometimes years. Not because you were useful, because you were theirs. That's not medicine, that's not survival strategy. That's the thing that makes us human. Written in calcium and stone, buried in caves and riverbeds, waiting for someone to dig it up and read it. So next time you're sitting in that emergency room, annoyed about the wait, scrolling your phone while your arm throbs inside a fresh cast, remember what that room actually is. It's the latest version of something that started 1.77 million years ago, with someone chewing food for a toothless old man in Georgia. It started 50,000 years ago with a group of Neanderthals feeding a one-armed, half-blind man every day because leaving him behind wasn't something they were willing to do. The cast on your arm is new. The impulse behind it is ancient. And it's the oldest thing about you that matters. And if you want to know how your ancestors managed to sleep at night surrounded by predators that should have eaten them, we made a video about that. Click here to watch it next.